Now it's time to check back in to see how the crew's holding up. Last we left off, the crew had taken 2 prisoners from a recent pirate raid. One was Tobin's grandaunt, and the other was... well, they aren't entirely sure who the other was. He's been rather tight-lipped since waking up. The crew's gone from nearly starving to death to being overwhelmed by the amount of rice they're producing. And that's with nearly half the tables disabled. They've even converted a considerable amount into chem fuel, and still, their supply is overflowing. Perhaps it was a bit premature to make so many hydroponics tables. But at least they'll be prepared for feeding the 2 new colonists and any new faces that show up before they escape this place, or die trying. There's still a considerable amount of resources they need to clean up from the surface of the asteroid from the previous raids. Frankie and Tobin, even though they're still a bit wounded, have gotten to work hauling in anything that can be useful to the crew. A bit of slag, a few tainted vac suits. They'll be able to smelt all of this down into valuable raw resources. These extra weapons aren't going to be useful in the near future, so the best option for the crew is just to smelt them down and use the steel to expand the base. They've been busy trying their hardest to sway the pirate prisoner towards being willing to join the crew instead of fighting against them. It's been slow progress, but he's finally starting to come around. They knew they were getting close when he finally told them his name. Turns out it's Mal. He admitted that the leader of the pirate crew was now out for pure vengeance. And Mal was feeling betrayed that he was sent out as fodder to fulfill a petty vendetta. It wouldn't be long now before they could finally convince him to join the cause of the crew. They decided to move the prisoner down into the dining hall so that he could more easily feed himself instead of relying on the crew to bring him meals every day. And that way they can avoid any chance of the prisoner starving to death when there's so much food on hand. Now that the barracks is cleared out, they can spend a bit of time rearranging things. Time to get these medical beds out of the center and add a few more bunks for the growing population. They only really need 2 more for now. 6 total should work nicely. There we go. This layout looks quite a bit better. Much cleaner. After quite a bit of time spent up, Mal has finally come around to seeing things the way the crew wants him to. Now they just need to convert him and he'll be ready to join the team. Since the crew is going to be facing mechanoids more and more frequently, they're going to need to get their hands on EMP grenades as soon as possible. Once the mech raids start getting larger, they're going to get absolutely crushed without that stun. They've set up a build to get to work on a new set immediately. In fact, Max has already started working on them. Hopefully they'll be ready to go before the next raid. Meanwhile, Mal has been fully converted to the crew's way of thinking. With no more ideological differences, they can finally finish recruiting him and make him an official member of the crew. Come to think of it, at this point, it's not really appropriate to keep referring to them as the crew, since there's no ship and they're completely cut off from the HMC. It would be more appropriate to refer to them as survivors. So, henceforth, they'll be survivors until they can get off this barren rock. It turns out that either before she arrived or immediately after, Estelle suffered a traumatic brain injury, leaving it permanently scarred. That's going to cause quite a deficit. It could potentially be healed if they could get their hands on the proper technology, but the odds of acquiring that are slim to none. She's going to have to just live with the damage for now. It's not like there's really any other option here. After all that work, the survivors have finally convinced Mal to join them. You'd think it would have been significantly easier than that, considering the fact that Mal has literally no other option whatsoever. It was either sit inside the rock until he dies, or try to help find a way off of it for everyone. Seems like a no-brainer. He's finally seen reason and decided to help get everyone off this rock. While that was happening, several cargo pods filled with agave have crashed on the far side of the asteroid. They absolutely do not need any more food right now, so they may as well turn the rest of this into chem fuel. Let's just hope nothing catches the crafting room on fire, or there's going to be a bit of an explosion. A massive explosion. Mal got to work making more chem fuel right away, and then suddenly he decided to go outside. Before anyone could stop him, Mal wandered out the front door and toward the far side of the asteroid. He did not make it far before collapsing from the strain of being out in the vacuum unprotected. Rescue was on its way as quickly as they could, but it only took a brief moment before he perished. It's unclear what exactly compelled Mal to decide to do this. Maybe he truly believed that there was no possible hope of making it off the asteroid and decided to just end things. If that's the case, he certainly chose an extremely strange way of going about it. Whatever the case, this is an extremely brief and unfortunate end to Mal's time here on the rock. Now, someone's going to have to go out and clean up the mess that was left behind. There's really only one surefire way to do that here on the asteroid. Yep, frag grenades. Quick and not as messy as you'd expect. R.I.P. Mal, we hardly knew you. Since Estelle is Tobin's grandaunt, the survivors didn't go through the process of converting her before recruitment. Because of this, she's brought some very strange ideas to the asteroid. In order to make her a little bit more suitable for living amongst the rest of the survivors, Max has been attempting to convert her slowly over time. At least it's going rather well. She's down to 28% now, so it shouldn't take much longer. Now they've gone back to work digging out this new access tunnel. They take turns going into the dark corridor one at a time and slowly whittling away at the remaining stone. It won't be long now until they crack through to the old tunnels. Then they'll be able to start expanding into new rooms for future projects. Theo and Max have now removed their vac suits, but unfortunately, there just isn't enough clothing to keep them fully clothed. They're going to have to go around without shirts on, at least until they can grow a bit more cloth. At least it's warm enough in the livable areas of the asteroid for them to not have to worry about it too much. It took a while, but the work is mostly done. They've already built the first section of the new airlock. The door is in place, and all that's left is to dig through. Only a few feet left, and they'll be finished. Frankie is set to work finishing the interior section of the airlock. Now they need to smooth these walls and install the rest of the conduit before the oxygen pump can function again. They made quick work of smoothing the walls, and now the conduits are all installed. The oxygen pump is up and running again, making the airlock ready to use. Well, not quite ready because of the big chunk of stone in front of the door, but pretty close. Max's mood has been pretty poor lately. Turns out he doesn't like living in space without a shirt on. Up until now, he's only been on the threshold of a minor break, but now his mood has dropped even further and he's snapped. While he's in this daze, he's at severe risk of walking outside and dying immediately, just like Mal. Now it's a question of whether or not the survivors should arrest him to avoid the risk, or just let him wander for a bit of catharsis. It seems as if Max is going to just wander around inside, so for the time being, the survivors have decided to risk it, and let him be. Hopefully that doesn't end poorly. Turns out, walking around inside an asteroid barely clothed is not the most enjoyable experience. Max and Theo have finally had the rest of their clothing made, but the timing was not the best. It's already at the point where they both need to put their vac suits on to get back to work. All four have gone to work smoothing out the rest of the walls. Now that's finished, they can finally get around to mining out these last few blocks of stone. They probably should have done that first, but apparently they just enjoy smoothing walls. There we go. They finished mining out the access tunnel and already got started on mining out the next room expansion. What will they use the new room for? That's a very good question. Now that all of the current projects are finished, they've returned to the dining hall to figure out their next plan. While discussing their next move, a disagreement sprung up between Frankie and Theo. Things got a bit heated and violence ensued. Apparently Theo called Frankie an outlaw, causing Frankie to throw the first punch. Interestingly enough, Frankie still has respect for Theo and sees him favorably. Theo, not so much toward Frankie. After the fight, Tobin joked about fighting swans with Frankie. Certainly Theo wouldn't appreciate being referred to as a swan. Hopefully he didn't hear it. While Estelle was taking a bit of a nap, Max decided to wake her up and take the opportunity to remind her of her obligations to the group. Apparently that was enough to finish converting her. Not the most appealing way to be woken up, but at least it worked. Estelle went to work tending the wounds from the social fight. Now, officially a full member of the survivors. Not much long after that, another raid has crashed into the surface of the asteroid. The Ghostface Comet is back once again. Perhaps Estelle should hide out inside so the pirates don't realize she betrayed them. Then again, none of them are going to leave this asteroid alive, so that should be perfectly fine. All 5 survivors suited up and prepared themselves. Max led the charge with his machine pistol. The first volley left several punctures in one of the pirates' suits. Apparently, the suits come equipped with some sort of auto-sealant or compartmentalization that stops the user from losing all of their oxygen when a hole appears. Otherwise, that pirate would be very, very dead. Between the traps and a few of the bullets that Max managed to land, the pirates are already significantly wounded before the fight is really even started. Frankie pushed forward and eliminated one of the pirates before the rest finally charged forward toward the survivors. The survivors began to retreat toward the outpost. They launched a smoke screen to cover the retreat, but it dissipated into the vacuum rather quickly. They made their way into the tunnel. The pirates chased, but the only ones still standing were significantly slowed by the damage they had already accumulated. Only one managed to make it into the tunnel, and Frankie made short work of them. Between the traps and the early harassment, the survivors had no trouble at all with this one. Well, now back to the outpost and continue planning on how to get off this rock. The very next day, a surprise announcement was made by Theo and Estelle. It came as a sudden shock to the other 3, especially Tobin, but the 2 had decided to get married. They haven't decided on a date yet, but soon they will hold the ceremony. It's a rather uncommon place to hold a wedding, but perhaps it will be all the more special as a celebration of human perseverance in an otherwise unforgiving and hostile environment. Turns out that Theo and Estelle had been talking about computer games when Theo decided to propose marriage. Clearly that was the determining factor. They bonded over their shared love of video games. Makes sense. It turns out that Theo still has a distaste for Frankie, even after the amount of work that Frankie has done to protect him. Theo just cannot get on friendly terms with him. Now that Theo and Estelle are getting married, things are going to get a bit awkward for Tobin. given the fact that she's still in a relationship with Frankie, and Theo is going to be her new granduncle. Comes as a bit of a surprise, but Estelle doesn't even really like her grandniece, and Tobin seems to even dislike her grandaunt a fair bit. Perhaps the entire raiding the asteroid situation has put a sour taste in Tobin's mouth towards her grandaunt. Trying to murder you tends to have that kind of effect on your relationship with a person. We'll see if over time they'll be able to get over the terms under which she joined. Now that the chaos and excitement of the previous raid has died down, Max has gone back to work cleaning up the mess that was left behind from so many perished raiders. There's a fair few vac suits that need to get smelted down so the resources can be repurposed for something a bit more useful to the survivors. They've been busy at work digging this other tunnel that goes directly through the center of the asteroid. Not only will it serve as another route to lure raiders through, but it's also going to be useful to dig side tunnels searching for new sources of steel. They've mined out all of the surface deposits, so they're going to have to go deeper looking for new veins. While they work on that, they've decided to start replacing some of these steel doors with plasteel. The plasteel doors are much stronger, but on top of that, they don't really have much use for plasteel, other than building more mini turrets. Steel, on the other hand, has a multitude of uses, and they're fairly limited in how much they can accumulate. So it is worthwhile to salvage any steel that they can from unneeded structures, even if that means replacing a steel door with a plasteel one. Once again, the tension between Theo and Frankie has come to a head with a fist fight between the two. The fight lasted only moments, with Frankie beating Theo until he collapsed. Frankie walked off, leaving Theo writhing in pain, until sense got the better of him. He went back, picked up Theo, and began dragging him back to the barracks. The entire situation started when the two were in the far end of one of the tunnels that they had been digging out. The two were bickering, leading to Theo comparing Frankie to a penguin. It drove Frankie into a rage, and the two began to fight. Unfortunately for Theo, it was an absolutely terrible choice to pick a fight with someone so much better in hand-to-hand combat than him. Theo only managed to land a single hit on Frankie before Frankie absolutely pummeled him. Once things settled down again, the survivors got to work digging out another new section of the outpost. It's not entirely clear what the survivors intended to use the new room for, but they've filled out all of the usable space in the rooms that they've already prepared. So, to prepare for the eventuality of needing more space, they've begun to dig. Took a day and a half, but the new room is almost completely dug out. The difficult part is going to be deciding what to use the space for. They can make small private bedrooms, or perhaps they could increase their storage space just to help clean up the crafting room a little bit. Before they came to a decision, an unfortunate surprise has arrived. With only a streak of light as warning, drop pods began to crash into the surface of the asteroid. Unfortunately, the crew were spread out across the asteroid and were in no way prepared for the raiders' arrival. Theo was immediately caught off guard. One of the pirates landed only a short distance away. The moment the pirate left the pod, he began to fire. Tobin was the next to arrive to see Theo collapse on the ground with a pirate not far away. Unfortunately, she was equipped with only a short-ranged weapon and had no way of closing the gap without suffering significant damage. She did the only thing she possibly could: wait for reinforcements. Shockingly, before anyone else could arrive, it was actually Theo that got back to his feet and began to fire at the pirate. Upon seeing Frankie emerge from one of the nearby tunnels, Tobin gathered the courage to move forward. Together, the three of them began firing at the pirate. With the help of Tobin's chain shotgun, it didn't take long at all to knock out the front pirate. Now they can regroup and prepare themselves to fend off the remaining pirates. The pirates moved through the tunnels to catch up with the survivors, but by the time the first one was through, they were already on the verge of death. As soon as they left the tunnel, they stepped directly on another stone trap, sealing their fate. The survivors caught the last pirate in the tunnel and began firing down the corridor toward him. It didn't take long for the barrage of bullets to tear down the pirate. The poor guy didn't stand a chance. After the battle, the survivors turned around and returned back to the outpost. Wait, isn't someone going to clean up all this mess? The double walls are important so that they can use the stone block walls without venting atmosphere through them. A single thick wall is not airtight, but for some reason, when you double them up, it works perfectly fine. Unfortunately, things just did not last between Estelle and Theo. They were in the middle of a conversation when Estelle told Theo it's not working out. Turns out they were joking about loving, then they chatted about lovers, and then the relationship ended. It's all much clearer now why things ended. Is it really anyone's fault that they couldn't experience loving when they're living on an asteroid in such close quarters with 3 other people? There's really not much you can do about that. Several days have passed and each one was certainly awkward to say the least. It was difficult not only for Estelle and Theo, given that they couldn't get away from one another, but it was also difficult for everyone else to have to walk on eggshells because of such an uncomfortable situation. To try to clear the air a little bit, the group decided to throw a party and unwind. Estelle chatted with Frankie about fat animals. Well, who doesn't love fat animals? Then they chatted about practicing with frag grenades and injustice. Interesting combination of topics. After all of that, the conversation moved on to an exchange between Frankie and Tobin regarding the link between cannibalism and technology. Oh, to be a fly on the wall listening to that particular conversation. It's really difficult to imagine the connection made there. Another 5 days passed without much incident. Unfortunately, the peace came to a sudden end when a group of mechanoid drop pods crashed right into the asteroid. The turret engaged one of the Scythers immediately, but for some bizarre reason, the Scyther decided to walk away, making it out of range before the turret could do any serious damage. Max went and grabbed the EMP grenades and the group set out. They approached the nearest mechanoid, and with a perfectly thrown EMP grenade, the mech was stunned immediately, and the rest of the survivors opened fire. It only took a moment, and the mech was destroyed. They waited patiently at the exit of the tunnel system and planned an ambush. They began firing before the Scyther even left the tunnel. It sustained massive damage and collapsed almost immediately. If they all die that fast, this raid will be over as quickly as it started. The survivors waited patiently and one by one picked off the Scythers as they left the tunnel. They made short work of the raid without risking any real threat to themselves. If only every raid could go that smoothly. Over the next couple of days, life returned to its usual quietness. The survivors continued to mine and continued to plan their escape. Unfortunately, as of now, not a single one of them presented a viable strategy for actually escaping this rock. Perhaps the secret to their salvation rested in the more advanced technologies that they've yet to discover. And now the peace was broken once again by pirates crashing into the asteroid. Do they have a ship in orbit launching these pods toward the asteroid? Or are these transport pods arriving from the surface? It's difficult to say. The survivors have had no indication of where exactly these pirates are coming from. Perhaps Estelle knows the answer to that, but so far, not a single one of the survivors thought to ask. The first half of the raid took care of themselves by walking straight into deadfall traps that were strategically placed throughout the tunnels. The survivors waited patiently for the remaining pirates to make their way through the rest of the tunnels. The pirates must have seen the remains of their fallen comrades spread across the floor and walls. What a horrible sight. Two of the pirates made it all the way through and emerged not far from the entrance. The survivors opened fire and made short work of the lead raider. The second raider did make it into cover, but it really didn't take long for the gunfire to become overwhelming. The raider collapsed under the strain, allowing Tobin to approach and begin stripping off the vac suit. Unfortunately for the raider, they would not last long at all in the vacuum without protection. While all of that was going on, one of the crew managed to bring a surviving pirate back into the dining room, where their wounds could be tended and the process of recruiting them could begin. Hopefully they'll join and end up being a valuable part of the team. Hopefully they survive a little longer than Mal. The next project that the survivors are going to work on is expanding the dining room, just enough to fit a high-tech research bench in. At this point, it is fully settled in that help is not coming, and that the only way for the survivors to get off this rock is going to be a self-rescue. They're going to need to develop the technology capacity further, far enough to build something that will allow them to reach the surface of the planet, whether it be a shuttle or transport pods. To achieve that, they're going to need the high-tech research bench. They made short work of mining out the section for the new research bench. Now they need to smooth out all of these walls before construction can begin. Perfect, there we go. The new high-tech research bench is already built and ready to go. Now it's just a matter of choosing which route to go through the tech tree. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for updates on all future videos. For those of you who made it all the way to the end, please consider checking out my Patreon to help support the creation of more videos like this one. You'll find the link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and see you for the next one.